Whenever someone makes a video about mental health awareness, they usually come out at the beginning of the video and issue a trigger warning to their viewers. They tell them that if the content is going to be unusually upsetting for them, they should probably click out and wait for the next video. I understand the rationale behind that sensitivity, but I'm not giving you a trigger warning for this one. I'd like you to watch it. I'd like you to watch it with an open mind, an open heart, compassion for your fellow man, and compassion for yourself. There's an old expression that says, be kind, for everyone you know is fighting a battle you know nothing about. I'd always thought that truer words were never spoken regarding mental health, until I watched the docuseries The Me You Can't See, produced by Oprah Winfrey and Prince Harry for Apple TV. I'm Linda. This is Linda's World, and I would be remiss if I didn't make a reaction video to that brilliant docuseries. So, my reaction starts right now. Whenever I'm in conversation with someone and the topic turns to mental health, I have a tendency to go on for a long and unspecified period of time. So for the purposes of this video, I'm just going to keep it simple and give you my simple takeaways. The Me You Can't See is available for streaming on Apple TV, so if you have this service, I highly recommend watching it. There are 6 episodes, each one just under an hour in length, and the humanity that the participants of this project give to mental health awareness is unparalleled, and that's why I think that it's definitely worth a watch for pretty much everyone. I highly doubt that there's a person on this planet who hasn't been touched by mental health in some form at some time, either for yourself or for someone close to you. And that's one of the things highlighted in the series, in that it is a global, universal, and human problem to start. Now, I've been enjoying Oprah Winfrey's content since I was 9. It was 1986 when her first TV show came out, and I have no doubt that she knows how to handle helping humanity. But as for Prince Harry, well, I had my trepidations there. I mean, he's a prince after all, so what problem could he possibly have? I was thinking about that, and then I remembered a day in 1997 when I turned on the news and saw a little boy with red hair in a black suit saying goodbye to his mom at her funeral while the rest of the world watched. And the next day at the palace, it was business as usual. So I thought better about that and I let Harry in. Now, the video begins with Oprah and Harry talking about his particular mental health struggles and how he felt incredibly powerless as a little boy, with his mom being photographed by the paparazzi and, being chased to her death by them and so forth, and feeling like there was nothing he could do, that he was a prince, but he was just a boy, and he couldn't save his mom. Now, he goes on to talk about self-medication and joining the army and not dealing with it at all for like 2 decades, until finally conversations and arguments with his wife prompted him to know that he needed to get some help. He says something really profound in the video, and this is where I'd actually like to start to get into the meat of my takeaways here, which is that pain that is not transformed is transmitted. In other words, if you don't work out the pain that you have in yourself, you're going to visit it upon others. And this is what makes mental health awareness such an amazingly important topic for all humanity, because all of us inside who suffer the slings and arrows of life are equipped to deal with them with varying degrees. Some of us get more slings and arrows than others. Some of us might be princes. Some of us might be like the guy in India that was in the video who was jumped for being gay by the police without $1 in his pocket to get the help he needed. But the thing is, at the end of the day, we're people, we hurt. And if we don't harness the hurt and find a way to transform it, we transmit it to others. And that's exactly what, in my estimation, is ruining the world today. Now, the next participant in the video is also a famous person, and that person is Lady Gaga. Now, here's the interesting thing about Lady Gaga's participation in the docuseries. She goes by Stephanie. Her name appears across the screen. It doesn't say Lady Gaga, it says Stephanie. And I'll tell you why. Because Lady Gaga is a character on stage. Stephanie was sexually assaulted and kept prisoner in a recording studio while the producer did whatever the heck he wanted to her, until she developed such incredible PTSD that her entire body was in agony and she had to cancel her Joanne tour, because the body never forgets trauma, as hard as the mind might try. So I listened when she said that it's important to find your way back in any conceivable way, that it's important to tell someone, not show someone, but tell someone how it is that you're feeling. She spoke of the issue of self-harm, and she talks about how she used to cut herself to express physically the emotions that she couldn't express to others and the fact that she hurt. And She talked about how it makes you feel worse. And she talked about telling someone who can validate you, who can tell you that your feelings are real, to confide in at least one person who is there for you unconditionally and is not going to tell you to just get over it. It happened yesterday, as so many people are fond of doing in my personal life. Now, that's where the celebrity ends, because for the rest of the video, all 5 parts until the 6th one is just actually a recap, there are just people from all over the place who are telling their personal stories, including this one fellow who lost his child to suicide and has started an animal ranch where people who have lost their children to suicide can come and heal by communing with broken animals. Animals themselves, dogs, cats, chickens, horses, and so forth, who have also been in abusive situations. So in that way, this man is giving back to his community in healing, which brings me to the second takeaway that I have from this video: the importance of community and ending the stigma. Now, some time ago, I was watching the movie Ordinary People, and Ordinary People is a movie where this kid, his brother died. He had survivor's guilt from this accident, and he attempted suicide. His dad was too lenient on him, his mother too tough, and he was trying to navigate his own mental health in his year back from having had this suicide experience. Now, at one point, the father let slip to a person at a cocktail party that the son was in therapy, and the wife was absolutely horrified and chastised him for saying so. This brings me to the me you can't see, in that every single person in this video spoke of the same thing: stigma. I've always said that if you went to the doctor and he told you that you needed insulin for your diabetes, and you went home and told your family that that's what the doctor said, they wouldn't tell you to just be strong, that it's all in your mind and you didn't need that insulin to get better. So why would you do the same for a person who came home and said, I've got this antidepressant because the doctor says I'm depressed? I've got this anti-anxiety medication because I have panic attacks. Why would you do that? And so ending the stigma becomes an incredibly important piece of the journey of the video. And all the participants explain that there are cultural barriers. There are people in Africa who explain that they don't have the resources and that it's a source of shame. There are people in the Middle East who speak the same way. There's a man who goes on and on about the grief of the loss of his mom and how he had to turn to lyric poetry to express himself, because that was the best way that he knew how in his culture, with the stigma around him, to stop from losing his mind, because he had to get it out somehow. And that there are so many different ways in which we can reach out to others and express our pain, if only people would be open to receive it, because they don't carry the stigma. It's been said by a couple of people, and somebody specifically in the video whose name escapes me, that the stigma of mental illness in some cases is actually worse than the symptoms. And I myself am no stranger to that. As a person who's suffered from bipolar disorder since birth, but was only diagnosed at 28, I can honestly tell you that there are times when the people who know my illness will look upon some of my behaviors and they will automatically slap the label on and say, you're doing this because you're depressed. You're doing this because you're manic. You're doing this because you're in a mixed episode. You're doing XYZ. When I can't just be Linda. I am my disease. And that is an incredibly important part of the me you can't see as well. There's a woman whose name is Pat Deegan, and she was a person who is a psychologist and groundbreaking person doing work with the mentally ill, who herself was diagnosed with schizophrenia. And she says, and I quote, "I am not a schizophrenic. I am a woman who has schizophrenia." And that is probably the biggest takeaway that I want to give to you in this video. The fact that if you are a person with a mental illness, you are not your illness. That's one of the things you are. I'm bipolar, but I'm so many other things. I'm a dog mom, I'm a teacher, I'm a daughter, I'm a friend, I'm a blonde, I'm petite, I'm a Democrat, I'm all kinds of stuff. And being bipolar is just one of those things. And so to label me in that form would be incredibly limiting for me. And it would give me a stigma, a label slapped on my butt that I carry with me as I walk through society, and I will be ashamed. Another huge takeaway that I came with after I stopped watching this and settled myself on the couch for a while and thought my thoughts, was the concept of the power of shame. Now, many of the people who were featured in the episodes of The Me You Can't See were people who didn't suffer from clinical mental illnesses, people who had had trauma through no fault of their own and were silently suffering because they felt shame. They were victims of something, and they were the people in prison. Because that's exactly what shame does, and that's exactly what trauma does. Trauma keeps us in a prison when we should be pointing at the guy who did it or the lady who did it and saying that person deserves to be in the bars, not me. But that's not how the world works. And that's exactly what The Me You Can't See is trying to stop. Now, one of the more interesting stories for me personally that I hadn't counted on seeing was about a clinical mental illness, bringing me to my next point, and that is Glenn Close. Now, Glenn Close, for those younger viewers of Linda's World, was an actress who was quite famous throughout the entire 1980s. My favorite movie of hers is The Big Chill. Basically, a whole bunch of boomers suffer the loss of a friend and get together for the weekends to relive their friendship, and various issues come out. It's absolutely worth a watch. 1985, The Big Chill. Now, Glenn Close has two sisters, and she explains that when they were little, they were in a cult. Their parents were members of this cult, and that they extricated themselves or whatever, but that two of her family members, her sister and the sister's son, suffer from various mental illnesses, the sister being bipolar, the son being schizophrenic. And her sister looked at her one day as she was ready to leave the house and said, I need to talk to you because I can't stop thinking of killing myself. There's a man in my head who's telling me that I need to kill myself, and I need to say something about it to you. Like, I need to figure it out. Now, why I bring up Glenn Close's story is not to say, here's another celebrity talking about it. I bring up Glenn Close and her sister because this is a situation where you can tell that mental health impacts a family or a group of people. Whoever it is that you call your family, the family you were born to or the family that you found out there in the city somewhere, you are a human being, but you're also a member of a group. And when a member of the group is ailing, then the rest of the group is ailing, because you can't be the you that you need to be for the people in that group, whatever role you take. You know? And Glenn Close's sister had this problem. So what happens? Glenn Close now has a problem. Okay? And so moving to Wyoming, I believe it is, or Montana, to be closer to her sister and organize the community. And I was actually moved to tears when I saw this whole group of people sitting in like the rec center or a church basement or something like that. All people who were parents of mentally ill teens who were trying to figure out at the school level and the community level what to do to intervene when their children were going through issues, and how they could mobilize as a community and figure out how to break the stigma, get through to the young people before they become old people wandering on the beach not knowing their own name because they didn't get the help they needed 50 years ago. And I just wanted to cry and say, where was this 35 years ago when I needed it? You know, but also, isn't it amazing that as each generation goes on, and the people in this room weren't young, they were people who were, you know, older than me, my parents' age and up, talking about the importance of breaking this cycle and intervening and getting people the help that they need. These people come from generations of silence, generations where you didn't speak a word about anything. If grandpa was acting a little strange, that was just grandpa. Never mind the fact that he had parachuted out of a plane in World War II and suffered from shell shock, which we now call PTSD. You know what I mean? Mom's acting a little funny. Mom is under stress. Mom burns the dinner. People didn't say, maybe mom is suffering from depression because she's a housewife with absolutely no adult, stimulation, and she needs to see a therapist to work out the deal of her life. You know, they didn't do that years ago. And so a whole bunch of people sat in this room in a state where you wouldn't expect that to happen and talked about next steps in the community. That brings me to my next point of interest in the video. The series talked about next steps and what we can do as a community. Communities, in other words, our towns, and communities in our countries, as well as the global community, and how we can fix what's broken, which is that if I go to a doctor and present with symptoms of cancer, I should be able to go to the doctor and exhibit symptoms of depression, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, post-traumatic stress disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, name your disorder, and I will get treated with the utmost sameness in respect and dignity, and that I will not be told to get over it. It happened yesterday. That is incredibly important. The fact that on a global scale, the Me You Can't See took a wide variety of folks from all walks of life and got them to tell their stories and express the fact that it's only through narrative that we can begin to heal and face whatever the next steps may be as a community. Now, as I mentioned the word narrative, I have to bring up an interesting point. A couple of years ago, when I was still married to my ex-husband, he chastised me for telling a story. I was explaining something about work, and I don't remember what it was, but he told me that he had an issue with me, that I spoke only in narrative. He said that I'm a storyteller and that conversation is no place for story, and that if somebody talks for over 10 seconds about themselves, they've gone too far, and that the world doesn't exist in narrative, and I need to knock it off. I'm not married to that person anymore because one of the huge takeaways that I got from the Me You Can't See is the importance of personal narrative. A person should be able to air their dirty laundry, as the saying used to go, if that dirty laundry can be assisted. A person should be able to sit with another human being who understands what they're going through, or at least is trying to, and express themselves and tell the story. This is what happened to me. This is what I went through. This is what I saw happen to some other guy. This is what I deal with when I go to sleep at night. These are the thoughts in my head. And be able to speak their narrative without judgment or fear. And if possible, be assisted afterwards. That's beautiful, and that is not hard to come by. And that's what the docuseries is trying to explain. Now, the final point of this series is something that I think is probably my main point in Linda's world. It's a point that I think is why I do videos in the first place, why I sit down on my living room floor and express to you how I'm feeling about something I saw or read or watched for the purpose of self-improvement. And that is this. Sometimes events occur that mean a lot to other people, and you find that it means plenty to you, but in a different way. In the past year, our society has been affected by a pandemic. And one of the effects of the pandemic was the fact that people had to be isolated for long periods of time. Otherwise, they might die of a deadly virus. And in being isolated, they also were prohibited from doing life as they knew it, And so much grief and pain was experienced by people who lost loved ones, by people who got sick themselves, by people who were afraid to be sick, by people who didn't understand why other people were afraid that they were going to get sick. And People's True Humanity came out during the pandemic because with everything closed, people had time on their hands for the first time in years to really know themselves and reflect. And Prince Harry said something really interesting about the pandemic and mental health. He said that he couldn't disagree more when people talk about it being the great leveler, that we're all the same in this. He said that people had been suffering before, and that the pandemic just made it worse, and that people are less equal now than they were in very many ways, financially and otherwise, but specifically for the purpose of the series in mental health. Now, why I say that it's the main point of Linda's World and why I make videos is because while the whole world was watching people go through the disease and the testing and the closings and this and that, my brain was elsewhere. My brain was thinking about how the pandemic was affecting people and how the isolation was affecting people who weren't at tip top to start with. You know, what of the woman who was told to stay off the street and not go to the store and not go to work and stay in her apartment with the husband who was abusing her? What of the child who was closed out of school and told to do it online when he was desperate to leave his house because his mom couldn't stop hitting him and tormenting him? What of the little girl who was forced to stay home for a year with her father who was molesting her? You know what I mean? What if you had just figured out that running was a way to combat your stress and your depression, and that you put on your jogging shoes every morning and ran 2 miles, but they told you that you couldn't, and you had to sit down for a year and not do the one thing that pulled you out of your suicidal depression? What of that person? Basically, what I'm saying is it's kind of a version of what Harry and Oprah were talking about the fact that the pandemic held a mirror up to people. It made people question who they were because they had time on their hands. It made them question the people that they were around and whether or not they wanted to be around them anymore. It made people feel like they had put their lives on hold. And for some people, myself included, those things that were considered trivial, that were closed because of social distancing, were things that were the only thing keeping people off the bridge, you know? And then, to add insult to injury, literally and figuratively, you say that to somebody or you post it on Facebook or something and you're slammed as being insensitive. How could you think about wanting to go to the concert when people are dying? It's like, how do you know that going to see that concert was the plan that I had that was keeping me from planning to end my life? That was the only thing I was looking forward to that night or ever, you know? That's what the video is talking about. That's what the Me You Can't See is all about. The Me You Can't See is called the Me You Can't See, if you ask me, because, there's a lot of me's in that sentence, because it's a series that looks, for probably the first time ever, deeply into the real issues, the issues of humanity, the issues of the human brain and the human spirit, and us as a collective community, and how cheaply we treat it at times. It's only in the past couple of years that people are talking about mental health at all. I remember a time when it was of the utmost embarrassment and no one said a word. And how fortunate we are that we live in a world where we can tap a couple of buttons on our phones or on our TV screens or our computers, and we can watch 2 thoughtful, intelligent, rational human beings discussing this, and then calling upon other rational, thought-provoking human beings to engage in a dialogue about something that affects us all in different ways. That is my reaction to the Me You Can't See. And that is why I said that I would be remiss as a mental health content creator if I didn't tell you exactly why I thought it was absolutely brilliant television. Thanks for sticking with me this long. Maybe the next video won't be as serious. Who knows? Mental health is an ever-evolving experience, and we're all just people in the world getting through it, myself included. Thanks for getting through it with me.